Hey there, I'm Mr. Terry, and I'm a high school history teacher. Welcome back to another History Teacher Acts video. All right, today we're checking out a little TED Talk video, and it's called 6 Myths About the Middle Ages That Everyone Believes. And this should be good because there are a lot of things that people have that are misconceptions about the Middle Ages. So hopefully I can add some to this list, or at least explain what they have. All right, let's get started. All right, here we go. First thing to understand about the Middle Ages is that they do not actually exist. There's a couple ways you could view this. Have you ever heard that there's like a conspiracy? I don't know if I covered it like in a video, but I remember that like it didn't exist. Like literally there's a chunk of years, like centuries or something, that like calendars messed up that like literally didn't exist. Okay, now it's already like a dumb way to, because it's totally this like weird Eurocentric view. It's between the Roman Empire and the Renaissance. Like, do you know there's a lot of things going on in the world at that time, and not just outside of Europe. But anyway, we'll see what they mean by that.
Medieval Europe, where unbathed, sword-wielding knights ate rotten meat, thought the earth was flat, defended chastity belt-wearing maidens, and tortured their foes with grisly gadgets. Except,
Some of that's true.
This is more fiction than fact. So where do all the myths about the Middle Ages come from? And what were they actually like? The Middle Ages refers to a 1,000-year time span, stretching from the fall of Rome in the 5th century to the Italian Renaissance in the 15th.
Where's all the Byzantine fans? Rome never fell, it just was the chunk on the left did, right? Which is already a ridiculous thing because it's a very Western European centric view. Dude, the Byzantine Empire was killing it.
Though it's been applied to other parts of the world, the term traditionally refers specifically to Europe. One misconception is that medieval people were all ignorant and uneducated. For example, a 19th century biography of...
Well, here's the thing though, most people were peasants. 90% of people were like peasants who were largely illiterate too. There's literate people, but a lot of people were not.
Christopher Columbus incorrectly purported that medieval Europeans thought the earth was flat.
See, yeah.
Sure, many medieval scholars describe the earth as the center of the universe, but there wasn't much debate as to its shape.
Sure. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know where that came from, to be honest. The Middle Ages thinking the world was flat. No, it was believed, like that cartographers were doing that stuff, and already the Greeks had figured that out. And so, yeah, like the Columbus thing, I don't know where that came from, because Columbus knew the world was round. He knew that already, and so did anyone. The problem was that why people didn't trust Columbus is his math about the circumference of the earth was way off. He thought the earth was way smaller than everyone thought. Like going to Asia was, between like the Americas and Asia, or not the Americas, Europe and Asia was like thousands of miles shorter than it was. That's why it was like a or not a groundbreaking thing, but why he was wrong.
A popular 13th century text was literally called On the Sphere of the World, and literacy rates gradually increased during the Middle Ages alongside the establishment of monasteries, convents, and universities.
After like
1000 was
1000
also not lost.
AD.
Greek and Roman texts continued to be studied. The idea
and a big reason for that was a lot of Latin did die, or whatever. But the Latin learning was revived by the Holy Roman Empire. So you can put Charlemagne on that.
Medieval people ate rotten meat and used spices to cover the taste was popularized in the 1930s by a British book. It misinterpreted one medieval recipe and used the existence of laws barring the sale of putrid meat as evidence it was regularly consumed.
It was actually meat, especially if you're a peasant, you were like one of most people. It was pretty much a delicacy to even get meat. The medieval diet did suck though. It's like onions and turnips and cabbage and stuff. But yeah, meat was, for a peasant, very
In fact,
uncommon,
medieval Europeans avoided rancid foods and had methods for safely preserving meats, like curing them with salt.
Sure, salt.
Spices were popular, but they were oftentimes pricier than meat itself.
They were.
So if someone could afford them, they could also buy unspoiled food.
Oh, there's so many things to add. The reason why it's so expensive in Western Europe is because Europeans get their spices. They come from Asia, but there's so many intermediaries across the Silk Road. There was no direct contact between Europe and Eastern Asia, especially Southeastern Asia, until like Vasco da Gama and other European explorers started going around Africa to get that. So it was incredibly marked up.
Meanwhile, the 19th century French historian Jules Michelet referred to the Middle Ages as 1,000 years without a bath. But even small towns boasted Middle Ages as 1,000 years without a bath. But even small towns boasted well-used
Romans didn't
public
bathe that much either,
bathhouses.
though.
People
The
lathered
fact is, actually, life expectancy rates were lower in the Roman Empire than they were in the Middle Ages. Didn't say much. It was like 25 in Rome, just because disease was rampant. When you have places like Rome and some of the big cities were incredibly densely populated, diseases spread like crazy.
up with soaps made of things like animal fat, ash, and scented herbs. And they used mouthwash, teeth scrubbing cloths with pastes and powders, and spices and herbs for fresh-smelling breath.
Yeah.
So how about medieval
They
torture
use spices and stuff to make you not as stinky. You know the plague doctor mask with like the beak? Do you know that? If you didn't know, that was to put like incense and spices and stuff like that. For them it was to block the plague, but yeah.
In the 1890s, a collection of allegedly terrible
Europeans
relics of
did bathe a lot
semi-barbarous
less than
age went on
Asians
tour.
though.
Among them, the Iron Maiden, which
Ooh, that thing.
fascinated viewers with its spiked doors.
Those weren't that
but it was
common, though.
fabricated, possibly just decades before. And there's no indication Iron Maidens actually existed in the Middle Ages. The Pair of Anguish, meanwhile, did exist, but probably later on.
A lot of the gruesome stuff was more like with the Spanish Inquisition, more than just the rest of Europe.
And it couldn't have been used for torture. It may have just been a shoe stretcher. Indeed, many ostensibly medieval torture devices
Oh, that
are
thing.
far more recent inventions. Medieval
Have you ever
legal-
seen this thing before as a torture device? I forgot what's it
Many
called. The
ostensibly
whatever bowl.
medieval-
It's like a bronze bowl, and it's you put a person in it, and it burns them inside.
torture devices are far more recent inventions. Medieval legal proceedings were overall less gruesome than these gadgets suggest. They included fines, imprisonment, public humiliation, and certain forms of corporal punishment. Torture and
Physical
executions
torture.
did happen, but especially violent punishments, like drawing and quartering, were generally reserved for crimes like high treason. Surely chastity belts were real, though, right?
No, those were stupid. I don't know where that came from either. That was like a meme.
Probably not. They were first mentioned by a 15th century German engineer, likely in jest, alongside fart jokes and a device for invisibility. From there, they became
Fart
popular
jokes are
subjects of
timeless.
satire that were later mistaken for medieval reality. Ideas about the Middle Ages have varied depending on the interests of those in later times. The term, along with the pejorative Dark Ages, was popularized during the 15th and 16th centuries by scholars biased toward the classical and modern periods that came before and after.
Because the whole thing was like, it was like, okay, Rome, it was great, right? The Dark Ages, it was ruled by Christian, obviously the Christian church dominated, in the Middle Ages there, but just like dogma, and everybody was all crazy superstitious and all that. And of course, that was overstated. And then with the secular movement of the Renaissance, that's where those bookends come from. But yeah, it's not a very good term. I mean, really. But the thing is, it's speech. It's like we know what each other mean, though, when we use those terms.
And as Enlightenment thinkers celebrated their dedication to reason, they depicted medieval people as superstitious and irrational. In the 19th century, some romantic European nationalist thinkers, romanticized the Middle Ages. They described isolated white Christian societies, emphasizing narratives of
And
chivalry
that stuff
and
wasn't
wonder.
true either.
But knights played minimal roles in medieval warfare,
It's true.
and the Middle Ages saw large-scale interactions. Ideas flowed into Europe along Byzantine, Muslim, and Mongol trade routes.
Now, the thing is, though, that stuff is the late Middle Ages, right? Especially post-Crusades. The Crusades really kind of opened up Western Europe. That 500 to 100-ish time was pretty rough, actually. Very Western Europe was very closed off. But around the new millennium, things really started to pick up. With interconnectivity, population started to get back. It wasn't until like 1000 that the population of Western Europe even got to what it was from before the Roman Empire fell. Population had sunk. I mean, when Western Rome had fallen, I believe Western Europe was like 10% of the population it was at the height of the Roman Empire.
And merchants, intellectuals, and diplomats of diverse origins visited medieval European cities. The biggest myth may be that the millennium of the Middle Ages amounts to one distinct, cohesive period of European history at all. Originally defined less by what they were than what they weren't, the Middle Ages became a ground for dueling ideas, fueling more fantasy than fact. History is full of legends. Learn about the imaginary king who influenced real-world politics for over 400 years.
Final thoughts.